Department of Justice, the First World War was fought by well over 65 million servicemen and women. The United States Department of Justice also claims that there were over 37 million casualties as a direct result of the war. These include injuries, deaths, and missing person reports. Keeping those statistics in mind, it's easy to see that World War I really had a huge impact on history. But if your education was anything like mine, your history classes has probably glanced over World War I in order to get to the World War II, which is slightly larger and more recent. To me, this seems to be a mistake because World War I really set the stage for World War II and explained why Germany was so hostile at the time. Once I noticed that my history curricula was really lacking in that respect, I started doing independent research to discover some facts about World War I. And last year, I was lucky enough to take a United States history course, and I was granted the opportunity to actually teach the class about one specific part of World War I. And the part that I chose was the pre-World War I alliance system. And not only was that alliance system obviously kind of the belligerents of the war, but they were also a direct cause of the war. You need to know that World War I was originally called the Great War because it really was the first world war. There was no World War II at the time, so they just called it the Great War. And you need to know that by the time that the war ended, over 100 countries were involved. But for this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the two main alliances of the time, which were known as the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The Triple Alliance was an alliance formed between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And this alliance actually came from another alliance that was formed earlier, which was the League of Three Emperors, which was formed in the 1870s or so. The League of the Three Emperors was an alliance between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, which were all obviously ruled by emperors, given the name. The problem with that alliance was that the Ottoman Empire, which on this map is labeled Turkey, but at the time was actually the Ottoman Empire, was declining. And because that power was declining, it was losing influence over the Balkans. This region here, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, that's called the Balkans. And since its power was dwindling, both Russia and Austria-Hungary were seeking to expand into the region in order to gain more access to both the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The problem there is, since they were both entered into an alliance, this conflict of interest really led to that alliance breaking up. Once Russia left the alliance, Germany and Austria-Hungary were afraid that France and Russia would form an alliance, thus giving them a double front war if a war was to break out. So seeking to kind of solidify their alliance and giving them kind of a buffer between a Franco-Russian alliance, Germany and Austria invited Italy into their alliance in 1882, according to Britannica.com. That formed what we call the Triple Alliance. However, there was one important clause of that alliance that really comes into play later in the war, and that was that in the event of war, if either Germany or Austria-Hungary acted as an aggressor, that is, started a conflict, Italy had no obligation to enter the war on their side. The Triple Alliance's fears of a Franco-Russian alliance were actually realized in 1894, which was 12 years after this alliance formed. BBC.co.uk, a popular news site and education resource, reports that the Triple Entente was an alliance formed between Britain, France, and Russia, and the main purpose of the alliance was to counterbalance the power that was Germany, Austria, and Italy at the time. Now, this is ironic because the entire reason that the Triple Alliance formed in the first place was to counterbalance the potential threat of this alliance. So you can see that people in Europe were extremely paranoid at this point in time. Abbott Gleason, who wrote for Encyclopedia.com, states that Russia was concerned with the Austro-Hungarian aims to expand to the Balkans because, as previously mentioned, they also wanted to expand to the region. And because they were afraid that Austria-Hungary was also going to expand there, Russia began extending its hand to countries in the Balkans, trying to build a relationship with them. One of their main targets was Serbia, which you can see here. Serbia was comprised mainly of a Slavic ethnicity, and Russia also has a high Slavic ethnicity. And that tie, Russia thought, would come into handy when they began expanding into the Balkans, because if they were taken over by a nation with a common ancestry, they would probably not be as likely to revolt against the foreign power. However, at the time, Austria-Hungary was also seeking to expand into the Balkans, and they also targeted Serbia. They ultimately overtook a main Serbian city in the form of Sarajevo. Now, this didn't necessarily start a war, but obviously Serbians didn't like this. And because of the Austro-Hungarian occupation of Sarajevo, a nationalist movement formed in the form of the Black Hand. The Black Hand was an organization that sought to end the Austro-Hungarian stronghold over the city of Sarajevo, and they actually planned an assassination attempt as a form of revolt. So the leader of Austria-Hungary, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, planned to tour the city of Sarajevo. And when he did so, he was planning on traveling down the main street. This was obvious because that's obviously how the most people could see him. The Black Hand knew this, and so they staged an assassination. Now, it's actually a funny story as to how the assassination occurred, because it was originally a failure, but ultimately Franz Ferdinand was killed. Now, this set the stage for Austria-Hungary to really begin their war against nations in the Balkan to expand their territory, because this gave them an excuse. So after their Archduke was assassinated, it was kind of seen as almost a good thing in the country, because it really kind of gave them a reason to declare war on Serbia and expand their empire. So they actually gave Serbia a demand that was so unmeetable that Serbia felt the need to declare war. And once that happened, it set the system of alliances into effect. This is a political cartoon that was drawn at the time period that shows how World War I really started. After Austria declared war on Serbia, that forced Russia, a Serbian ally, to declare war on Austria. By effect, that made Germany declare war on Russia, and once that happened, both France and Britain had to enter the war on the side of Russia and Serbia. So this kind of started a downward spiral. Obviously, the countries in the Triple Alliance and Triple Entente had other allies that became involved, and that really began World War I. Although World War I was a truly multifaceted conflict, the alliance system is often blamed for being the main thing that started the actual conflict itself. And it's just really important to understand that, because understanding history is a really important factor in anyone's life if they want to understand why the world is the way it is today.